So it can happen to anyone. It may have happened to you. The text looked very official on the cell phone. It said, hey, you've won Publishers Clearinghouse. Millions are going to be your prize. All you have to do is send us the processing fee. We're going to need it in cash, of course. It's $15,000. Best if you send it in $100 bills. Just send it to this P.O. box. My client, Colonel Johns, retired Army, had been in command of many, many men with great responsibility. He realized that his ship had finally come in. He'd never won anything in his entire life. Here he was in the twilight of his years, retired for several years, widowed for a couple of years. Finally, this great thing had happened to him. He was so excited that he ran right down to his nearest blue mailbox and put an envelope there with $15,000, sent it off to the P.O. box, just as instructed on the text. He was so excited. The winnings would arrive the next week, they said. It may take a little while to process, but he was so excited that when he was taking the trash cans down the next day, he told his neighbor, "This is so exciting. I've never won anything before. You'll never believe it." His neighbor didn't believe it. It sounded fishy to the neighbor. What did the neighbor do? He called Colonel John's sons and said, "Hey, have you talked to your dad this week? Something doesn't sound right." Stop me if you've heard this one before. I've told this story many times before, usually when I'm talking about disability planning and how to build into part of your estate plan mechanisms that protect your estate if you become disabled, if you lose your way, if you start getting taken by scammers. Today, I'm going to tell the broader story. We're going to talk about Colonel Johns from the time I met him until, unfortunately, just recently I received a text, or an email rather, from his sons that he's passed away. And that's one of the real drawbacks to my area of practice. You know, I've been practicing law for more than 30 years. I've been doing nothing but estate planning, elder law, and probate and trust administration since about 2012. And one of the worst parts of my job is when I get those emails that say a client that I've gotten to know and that I really liked has passed away. And that's what's happened in this case. But today, instead of just talking about that one aspect of the story, because Colonel John's plan was so much more robust than just that one incident, we're going to talk about it from beginning to end in honor of him. Hey there, I'm Jim Miskell. You are listening to Let's Talk Estate Planning. This is the podcast dedicated to the proposition that when folks have their estate plan in place, a couple things happen. One is that there's less opportunity for family to fight because the family has a roadmap and some guidance on what to do when transitions occur. Second, when you got a good estate plan, things go the way you want them to instead of your family just ad-libbing as they go. They may love you, but you might want to give them some guidance on those sorts of things. Each episode, I try and focus on some aspect of estate planning that will make you better informed as you think about estate planning for you and for the estate planning that your loved ones may need. This is a podcast. This is not legal advice. So this is the disclaimer part where I tell you that legal advice comes from sitting in front of an attorney who's been hired to evaluate all the facts and circumstances of your situation to give you good advice about what to do. What the podcast is about is giving some information, hopefully to be educational, hopefully to be a little bit entertaining so that you're better equipped to evaluate your own estate planning needs and also those of the people you love. Of course, I dream of a world where everybody's got their estate planning in place so families have less opportunity to fight, and that when transitions occur, families get to spend time together rather than running around town trying to figure out how to do administrative stuff, and they get to spend time together, which is where families should spend their time. So if you have specific questions about your situation, get in front of a good, experienced estate planning attorney. If you're in the state of Georgia, you can find the information on my firm in the description. Call us up, set up a consultation, or come to one of our complimentary workshops. I would love to see you there. Now back to our story. Colonel Johns, he came to see me in 2019. He actually came to an estate planning workshop to get information about how to be better prepared because, as I say, he had been retired from the military for several years. He's in his 80s, and he wanted to make sure that things went well for the rest of his life. He'd been widowed for about 5 years and was making plans for himself. Had two kids, two sons that he adored. They lived in other states. Of course, Colonel Johns was here in Georgia. We put together a revocable living trust plan for him, got his house, his real estate, his other accounts, those sorts of things properly transferred to the trust so that the trust really encompassed and gave the framework for the family as far as how things would go, so that the trust could function most effectively in controlling and administering those assets for the rest of his life. The story I told you about the Publishers Clearinghouse scam, the text that he got, that happened just a few months, about a year, I think. Well, a little bit less than a year after we got his planning in place. That's when I heard back from the family. The sons called me up. They let me know that when they heard from the neighbor and they talked to their father, and their father was sure that this was the real deal, that he'd really won Publishers Clearinghouse. Interesting to note, and you may have heard me say this before when I talked about disability planning, is that folks that have been in leadership positions who have made their professional life based on their own judgment, the ability to evaluate situations and make decisions of responsibility on their own determinations, those are the folks who, in my experience, in my practice, I've seen fall hardest for the scams, because they know to trust their judgment over those of the folks around them, because that's been the bread and butter for their entire professional career. And being a retired military officer, Colonel Johns fell into that description. When the kids came into town, they found that he had really fallen for this scam. They knew it was time for them to take the reins of the estate plan, and that's the way that Colonel Johns had laid it out. We put that disability planning in there such that if he lost his way, the entire estate would not be at risk. What can happen, and I've seen it happen with some other clients, is the first scam is just a beginning to get a taste, and the asks can be larger and larger from the scammers. When the sons got involved here, the first thing they did was they took his cell phone and they got him a cell phone at a different carrier. They turned it in, got a new one at a different carrier, a new phone, new carrier, and new phone number. What his son told me, his oldest son Matthew told me, was that 2 days after they got the new phone, the new number, the new carrier, the scammers pinged that phone with another text following up. So these scammers can be very tenacious. That's why it's important to have good planning in place, which he did. And so the upshot of this was that Matthew and William, his sons, became trustees of his trust just as he'd laid out, just as Colonel Johns had laid out in the trust when we set it out. And at that point, we did new certificates of trust for them, and they went about notifying the financial institutions that were custodians of his accounts, letting them know that they were the trustees now to make decisions on those accounts. This was the next time we had a call from the family, was during this process. It took some months for this process to play out for the sons to become the successor trustees in Colonel John's place as trustee. And in that process, one of the financial places, they didn't like the documents. They said, oh, we see he's done these documents, and we've noticed that the documents are more than 90 days old. And of course, the custodian said if they were less than 90 days old, we'd be able to accept them. But because they're older than 90 days, we've really got some questions about these documents, and can't you have your dad sign some more and that kind of thing. Well, this is a real pain in the neck for families. What they were asking for was, if you can't have new documents, can we get an opinion letter? An opinion letter. They want to know somebody's opinion. Whose opinion do they want to know? They want a licensed, practicing, in good standing attorney. Somebody that can say, these documents are okay. If you go ahead and let these boys be trustee, you won't have any problems under the law. Now, you and I know that the large financial houses, they don't care what some attorney in Georgia says, whether or not these are good or not. That really doesn't give them any protection. Why they're putting families through this, I don't know. They've got their own attorneys. They know. But this is where the family got back in touch with me. Matthew and William said, we need these opinion letters. Do you know what this is? Yes, I know what this is. So it was fairly easy for us to produce some opinion letters and send them off to the financial places. And the upshot was that the opinion letter that I sent was accepted, and they were able to conduct business. But Where it really matters to me and mattered to the family was that there was a gap of several weeks, it led into a couple months, where nobody was authorized to make decisions on those accounts because Colonel Johns had stepped down. His sons were trustees, but the financial institutions to whom it may concern that my letter was made to weren't really letting them do what they needed to do. So I gave them the opinion that, hey, look, these estate planning documents, and it's true across the board, doesn't matter what state they're made in, estate planning documents don't expire. There's no shelf life on them. They don't say there's no best by date, and if it gets 90 days old, you got to do new ones. No, that would be ridiculous. The whole reason we have them is so that when grief and crisis strikes, when transitions occur, they're there and ready. And that's the way they're built, and that's the way they work. But the opinion letter, I needed to go ahead and articulate that for him. And I gave him a little extra opinion at the end. In the last paragraph, I let him know, hey, as an additional note, estate planning documents, in this case, living trust, powers of attorney, and certificates of trust do not lose effectiveness over time. Whether it's day 91 or even day 9,001, they're just as effective as they were on day one. And here's my opinion, is that requiring family members to get opinion letters, it incurs expense of both time and resources, and it's a pain in the neck for families. And just because documents are merely 90 days old, they know better. And I wish they'd discontinue the practice. They accepted the opinion letter that the documents were good. They didn't accept my opinion at the end that they should stop doing this. What's my point? My point is that it really flummoxed the family when the financial institution said, hey, we can't accept these. They're more than didn't know what to do. That's where having a relationship with my office became so important to them, because they were able to make one phone call. We knew exactly what they wanted. They shot us an email with the request from the financial house. I produced the letters. We sent them off, and that resolved it pretty quickly. Without that, they'd eventually, I suppose, have gotten the documents approved. But how long that would have taken the internal process at the financial house to work through their legal department, who knows? But because Colonel Johns had worked with my office to produce this comprehensive plan, because I'd communicated with the sons before, it was very easy for them to reach out and us to resolve it for them. That's the part I don't talk about very often, was the support that we were able to lend the family as transitions occurred. Things don't always go smoothly. People don't always accept the documents the way they should. And thankfully, I was there to sort of nudge it along in this case. Hey, Jim Miskell here. Sorry to interrupt the episode. Hope you're enjoying today's content. A lot of times when folks are thinking about this kind of thing, questions spring to mind. If you have questions, we like to do some question and answer episodes. So you can go to our website, letstalkestateplanning.com, and shoot us a message and say, hey, on the podcast, I'd like Jim to cover this on the next question and answer session. Or if it's hitting closer home, especially if you're a Georgia resident, of course, we can't give legal advice on the podcast because it's not specific for your situation. But if you got a situation that you need to handle, it's important to get that done. So letstalkestateplanning.com is how to contact the office. I'd love to talk with you about the specifics of your situation and make sure your estate plan is everything that your family should have it be. In the meantime, we're going to go back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to talk to you soon. Eventually, it was not a good idea for Colonel Johns to continue to live here in Georgia on his own, and he ended up moving to Indiana, where one of his sons lived. And as I say, unfortunately, just recently, we've gotten the email saying that he passed away. And all my clients are my favorites, but he was one of my favorites. And he was just a delightful guy. And I'll tell you, sharp as a tack, you would think. I was surprised to learn that he had been taken by the scammers, because he was so fun to talk to, so insightful, had so many good stories that he was just a pleasure to know. And it's really one of the sad days in our practice when we hear back from families that clients have passed. But the happiness in that sadness is that because we'd worked so hard and thoroughly with Colonel Johns to set up his plan and get it properly funded, the administrative hassle at this point for that family is going to be pretty minimal. They're going to need a new tax ID number for the trust. And that's about it, because through the funding that was accomplished when we initially set up the plan, everything's really pretty well self-contained. The plan did everything it needed to do. It protected the assets from the colonel's own disability. It put the sons in the driver's seat with the colonel's instructions about how to carry out and how to take care of him. And it made it easy for the family to go ahead and make the moves they need to as his need for care developed and increased. They were just able to use the resources that he had so carefully set aside to accomplish that. Now, thankfully, they're not going to have a whole lot of hassle. They're not going to have to wait in line at the courthouse for a probate to go through. They're not going to have the expenses of extra probate. So although it's very sad to learn that one of my favorite clients has passed away, it's really comforting to know that we've made that family's journey through this process a lot easier by the work we did. So we were able to help them not only avoid probate when Colonel Johns died, but also as events occurred where they needed some assistance, where they needed some backup through the process, we were there to do that. So today, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to tell you a success story. Very often I focus on just the disability planning, which was a big part of his plan, but really is the support we were able to give to the family. From initially meeting with Colonel Johns, hearing what his concerns were, how he wanted to provide for the boys, how he wanted to make it easy for them to care for him as he aged, how he wanted the distributions to go, what his considerations were for grandchildren, everything that we built into the plan, and also helping the family as they hit little bumps along the way to this sad final event where now the plan is going to do what Colonel Johns set out to do, and that's distribute to his family without them having a whole lot of administrative hassle. That's my story today, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions about estate planning, about your specific situation, the best person to ask those questions to is an attorney who can take a look at your entire situation and make a determination about what's best in your circumstances. If you're in the state of Georgia and you'd like to have a consultation, go ahead and contact my office. Our website is the same as the podcast. Let'sTalkEstatePlanning.com is our website. I offer live workshops on estate planning a couple times a month. We've got a recorded workshop we can send to you if you'd like more information. Please take a look at the other episodes of the podcast. There's a lot of good information there. And I've got a comprehensive blog with a lot of good information there as well. If you thought this was good information, if you enjoyed it, hit like and subscribe, of course. Be looking for future episodes. Thank you so much. Take care.